Look at this beautiful antique infill plane. It's got a lovely cast metal body, beautiful wooden infill made from the finest walnut, an excellent blade. It cuts beautifully. The weirdest thing about this plane, the most surprising, is that it was handmade by the craftsman who used it. And I know that seems impossible, but I'm going to show you how it happened and when and why. This tool has a beautiful patina on it, nicks and marks from its making and its years of use, and all of that stuff tells an amazing, detailed history. And we are going to unpack every bit of it because this is Tool Stories. This plane sure doesn't look homemade. And it shouldn't. The body and lever cap to this plane were made in a big professional foundry. The iron came from William Marples, a legendary British toolmaker. All the wooden pieces are expertly fitted. They're incredibly ergonomic, a joy in the hand. But in the late 1800s, when this plane was made, it was actually common for craftsmen to make these for themselves. They'd buy all the metal bits, maybe in a rough cast state, buy the blade, and then they would fit and finish the entire thing, smooth out all those rough marks left from the casting, make the wooden pieces, fit them with incredible care and precision, fit the blade, get the whole thing tuned up and cutting perfectly. And all of this work was usually done at home. In Hans Brunner's excellent book on infill planes, he talks quite a bit about these user-made planes, and you can usually spot these because they don't have a maker's mark either on the body or on the lever cap, like the professional makers did. The irons are always marked, but all irons were marked back then, so that doesn't tell you anything. You can also tell user-made planes because the bodies are almost always cast. The fancier, more expensive professional infill planes were more often made with a dovetailed steel construction, but these user-made planes were made with plain gray cast iron or a fancier, nicer-looking brass or gunmetal. Gunmetal is a variation of brass with different chemistry. They actually made guns out of it way back in the day. It's a bit more durable, a bit easier to work, and it fights corrosion. In his book, Brunner shows a number of these user-made planes, and a lot of them honestly are pretty amateurish looking. But some of them have the fine fit and finish of a professional plane. Some of them look just like this one. These user-made planes were very often a direct copy of high-end commercially made planes. This one is extremely similar to a plane by the Stuart Spears Company, a top-tier infill plane maker of the era, and you would see the similarities right away if only I had a Spears plane to compare it to. Oh, all right. Here's a Spears plane that I bought for restoration. And you can see the similarities between the two tools. They're just too much to be coincidence. They're exactly the same length and width. All the curves and details are in exactly the same place and have the same radius. It's really clear that whoever made this plane was copying this one. It's even possible that the foundry just got a Spears body and used it as the pattern for making this plane. That happened sometimes. Now, this plane might have been purchased as a kit from a hardware store that would have sold the body, the lever cap, the screw, and the blade all as a package deal, or the craftsman might have gotten it from work. If he worked for a shipyard, a rail yard, or a carriage maker, those companies often had their own foundries and they would cast plane bodies and parts for their workmen. Not out of the goodness of their hearts, but so that these workmen could use the more demanding figured woods and fancy materials that were becoming more common. You really needed a metal plane for that. It's been a thing for a long time to take a high-quality, commercially made tool or a traditional tool, break it down, and turn it into a kit that the craftsman could make at home. This has been going on forever. Some people will do anything to make a buck. The best part of tool stories is tool marks, both from the tool's manufacturing and also from its lifetime in the shop. The wood on this tool is incredibly smooth and graceful, beautifully fitted to the metal parts, and you can't find a lot of tool marks left over from the making, but there are a couple. Under the blade, there's a slot for the chip breaker screw head, and this slot has very clear points and score marks in it, left over from the kind of centering drill bit that was common in the era. If we compare this to the slot on my Spears plane, well, that one is beautiful and smoothly finished. It's more commercial, more professional. As good as this one is, it's still clearly homemade. Also, this rear infill is in two pieces. It's one piece of wood all the way up to here, and then a second small piece of walnut has been grafted on right here. Now, it could be the original piece of walnut was a little too short, so the maker just grafted a new chunk on there. We've all been there. It could also be that the horn on this tote just snapped off at some point. I think we've all been there too, and he just added a new piece. Judging by the condition of this one and the lack of tool marks, I'd say repair is more likely, but I don't know. Now, my favorite feature of all the beautiful woodwork on this tool is right here. And you might miss it if you weren't looking closely. The maker of this tool actually connected the top of the tote down to the main body of the infill, which was an unusual move for this style of plane. The Spears company did not connect the tops of their totes to the infill, which made them fragile. They often snapped off down here. The one I have has the tote snapped off. By connecting the top of the tote to the main body of the infill, the maker allowed this plane to be much sturdier. He also curved and cut it away so you can still adjust the plane perfectly, and he matched the grain direction so this connection is still very strong. He knew exactly the weakness that he wanted to correct in the commercial one, and he executed it with incredible skill and foresight in his plane. It's very impressive. This plane doesn't have any maker's mark on it, but it does have a pair of owner's marks, and that tells an interesting story. The marks are W. Wethersfield and D. Oldham. Now, the Wethersfield marks are just underneath the blade where you can't see them at all, and the Oldham mark is struck twice on the bun, that's the front handle there, and underneath the blade. The Oldham mark is overstriking, covering up the Wethersfield mark. This tells us not only that the plane had two owners, but it also tells us the history. Wethersfield came first. He was probably the one who bought the parts and made the plane. And then at some point, he either retired or fell on hard times, and he sold the plane to Oldham. Now, why were these guys so intent on marking their planes, and why did Oldham have to overstrike the Wethersfield marks? Well, it wasn't for vanity, it was actually for economic reasons. If you were a joiner or a cabinet maker, especially in an urban area, you had to insure your tools. They were valuable and they got stolen. You take out an insurance policy, but the insurer insisted that all your tools be marked with your name, so maybe they could be recovered if they ever were stolen. When you first started buying tools, you'd go down to the ironmonger, that's what they called the hardware store, and one of the first things you'd get would be an iron name stamp, and you would use that to stamp your name on the wooden part of absolutely everything that you owned. So Wethersfield made the plane and stamped it so he could insure it, and when he sold it to Oldham, Oldham put his own stamp on and also overstamped Wethersfield to clearly signal that he was the new owner. Now, what I think is cool about this is that this was a homemade tool that was good enough, not just to make and put the effort into, but also to sell and insure and pass on to somebody else down the line. This homemade tool was super valuable. We can also tell a couple interesting things about this plane from the tarnish. The body has tarnished quite a bit, and thank God the previous owner didn't polish it off, because it tells us at least one cool thing. It tells us how the plane was gripped. I would naturally grip it just like this, with my thumb and forefinger on the front bun this way. That's not what it was, though. You can tell from the shiny spots here and on the other side, the craftsman actually held it like this, with his front knuckle bent just like this, and his thumb on the other side. And you know what? That grip actually totally works. I have shown this grip for wooden planes before, although I don't use it all the time. It's really unambiguous in the marks. The curve of the index finger fits the shiny spot right here. And this bigger shiny spot on the other side is obviously where the thumb sort of wipes back and forth and creates this polished spot in the tarnish. And because the body is pretty tarnished, we can tell it was used this way for a long time. This grip that seems unusual to us now must have been standard at some point. The owner of this plane also definitely used a toothed planing stop. There's no question There's marks right here on the toe that totally match what you would expect from a stop with metal teeth. That's interesting because I like planing stops, and it's neat to know that whoever used this plane definitely had a planing stop on his bench. I find them incredibly useful. But what is weird about it is I've been using a toothed metal planing stop for like 4 years, and I have never hit it with a tool once. So why did that happen to this person? I have no idea. You can also see right here just a couple of hammer marks on the toe of this plane, as if it was struck this way. I have experimented with that before, and you can advance the iron that way, but it doesn't make a lot of sense because you can just hit the iron back here, and this is mushroomed. Clearly, it was usually struck. Why was it hit just a couple of times on the toe with a metal hammer? Frankly, I have no idea. Why do these metallic infill planes exist at all? Why, when for hundreds of years the coffin smoother was the small smoothing plane of choice, why is it in the latter half of the 19th century, all of a sudden there's an explosion in metallic plane making, such a demand for them that not only are they commercially made, but you can buy a kit and spend hundreds of hours and probably quite a bit of money making your own? Well, the reason why these planes suddenly sprung into existence, well, part of it is because coffin smoothers, what's the word? They suck. That's the word. They're just not that good. They're difficult to grip. They're fairly clumsy. The soles are pretty delicate. The mouths open up very quickly, and you lose that tight mouth opening you need for fine work. Right now, many people are howling at me, telling me I have no idea what I'm talking about and that these are amazing tools. But the reason I think they're not that good, it's not just personal preference, it's also the number of these that you see with modifications. Patches to close the mouth, steel soles screwed on to keep the mouth from opening and make the planes more durable, the back of the plane chopped away and a tote added on, sometimes quite roughly. Coffin smoothers might be the most modified vintage tool out there, and it's because they were falling short of the mark, especially with changing times. In the late 1800s, figured woods, hard exotic woods, and specialized materials like ivory were becoming more and more common. Those things would just tear up this relatively soft beech sole. What you needed instead was a metal plane that would be more durable, have a very fine mouth opening, keep that fine mouth opening, and also have a tote, which made it a much better general bench plane for doing all sorts of work because it was just easier to grip. Of course, in the States, we didn't go in this direction. We had mass-produced cast iron planes like Stanley and others, and the whole history of why the continent and Great Britain went to infill planes while we went to Stanleys, it's super, super interesting. You should read the 2-part blog post by Joel Moskowitz, who owns the amazing Tools for Working Wood, and his article just covers so much more than I ever could because Joel knows more about this stuff than I do. I will link to his article down in the description. Last question, do you want a user-made infill plane for your shop? Maybe? I don't know. These are variable in quality. Okay, this one, the one from this video, is an excellent tool. Super tight mouth, incredibly well made, beautiful, super ergonomic. I really like it. Both these other two are not as good. This one's totally decent, but there's nothing special about it. The mouth is pretty wide. It won't do very fine work. This one clearly is fairly weird. The grip is strangely comfortable when you get used to it, but it's got a replacement iron and it's incorrect. Doesn't cut, needs a bunch of work. These were a craftsman made in the first place, so there isn't like a consistent standard of quality like you would get with a Spears or a Norris or a Matheson plane. The vintage infill planes from actual manufacturers are much more dependable. Of course, these are cheaper. But cheap is relative. I paid $150 for this one, and I paid $200 each for these. $200 will buy you an awfully nice hand plane, and there's no guessing games involved. So you can go to eBay and roll the dice on some of these. I did because I make these videos. So it makes sense for me to have some weird old tools to make videos about. If you're just trying to make good furniture and have good tools, these things are a waste of time. They're super fun, but they're not going to help your furniture building at all. Now, if you'd like to join our forefathers and build your own tools out of a kit, get the Compass Rose Router Plane Kit. It's the only router kit on the market that comes with the wood and literally everything you need to make the plane, and it's based off the classic old woman's tooth design. You can pick these up at compassrosetools.com. They were out of stock for a second, but we recently got some more in. And if you're interested in Compass Rose Tools, you should become a patron. Not only do my patrons get everything early, free plans, a great discussion forum, and exclusive content, they also get Compass Rose perks. They find out about all the tools early, days or weeks early. Sometimes I do limited edition tools just for patrons, and they pay less. During the release of the router kit, patrons paid less than anyone else. If you'd like to become one of my patrons, go on over to patreon.com/Rex Krueger. My patrons make this stuff possible, and I do everything I can to reward them. I also know that my viewers really like Tool Stories videos. This is number 2. You can check out the other one on a marking gauge. I have a lot of weird old tools. I could do a lot of these videos. What specifically do you want to see? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching.